Hi there. So today we are going to demonstrate a Bannock making video. So what I use in my recipe, and a lot of people use different recipes, I just use flour, baking powder, and salt, some oil, and some water. This is just your plain and simple ingredients for a Bannock. So if you're making a big Bannock, you would use about 5 cups of flour. If you're making a smaller Bannock, then only use about 2 cups of flour. So what I'm gonna do is, because I make Bannock quite a bit, I don't really measure. So I'm just gonna put in my own amount, but just remember you either use 2 cups for a small one or 5 for a large. So with every cup of flour that you use, I would say only to use about a teaspoon of your baking powder. The more baking powder you add, the more bitter your Bannock will taste. So I added, I would say 2 cups of flour. So I am only going to use one tablespoon of baking powder. And so I'm just gonna add that into there. And next I will add some salt. So with your salt, you usually keep it at, for 2 cups of flour, I would only add about a teaspoon of salt, and that would be it. If you're using 5 cups of flour, you would add probably 2 teaspoons. You don't want to add too much salt, because the more salt you add, the harder your dough will be, which will make your Bannock even harder. So you just add enough just to keep it from not being too sticky. So there we go. I added a teaspoon of salt. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stir up the dry ingredients, and I'm going to get them all mixed together. And then once I do that, I am going to make a well inside the flour. So I just grab the flour and start scraping it to the edges, because this makes it easier to add your wet ingredients to the dry ingredients, and then you slowly add them together to make your Bannock fluffy. So for 2 cups of flour, I would say you're probably looking at only 1 cup of water, but I would add it gradually as you go along to see the texture of your dough. For 5 cups, for a bigger Bannock, you would probably use about 2.5 cups of water. So right now I'm just going to add a little bit water. So I would say I'm probably only going to add 1/2 cup right now. There we go. And then you would use about a tablespoon of your oil for 2 cups of flour. And if you're using 5 cups of flour to make a bigger Bannock, then you would use at least 2.5 tablespoons of your oil. So I am only going to put 1 tablespoon in for myself, because I only have 2 cups in there. And you will see everything sits in the middle before you start mixing. So when you mix, you want to mix slowly and start bringing everything in slowly, because it makes your Bannock fluffier. Instead of if you just grabbed it all from the edges and mixed it all together, then your dough is probably going to be a little bit harder. So this is how I do it. I just add, and as you can see, the consistency is already getting thick. So I'm going to add the other 1/2 cup of water so that I could add all my dry ingredients. So that's about a cup of water with 2 cups of flour. And so you still keep working it like that, gradually adding, stirring it up as you go. And soon you'll be able to put the spoon down and form your dough. So at the end there, you can already see that it is all mixed together, and you can tell that mine is still a little bit sticky. So what happens when that happens is you're going to add some more flour. So you can just put everything down, get your flour, pour a little bit on top. And it doesn't matter if your Bannock is sticky, because you could always fix it with the flour. And then you just add it the same way you did before, with stirring a little bit. And as you can see, that fixed the problem. So now I'm going to put my spoon down, and I'm going to knead the Bannock a little bit. And this is where you don't want to knead it too much, because the more you work your Bannock, the harder it gets. So you just slowly grab from the outside of the bowl and pull it into the middle. You're grabbing from the outside in. And that's how you're forming kind of like an oval type thing, shape. And because you stirred it up so well as you were mixing it, you see how I don't have to knead it so much. My dough is already formed. So what you do is you take it and you bring your baking pan. And what I usually do is I add a little bit flour just so that it doesn't stick to the pan if it's a little bit sticky at your dough, which sometimes they are when you place them down. So you pick up your dough that you formed and you put it in the middle of your pan, and you see how 2 cups makes just a nice little bannock for probably 2-3 people for supper. So we're gonna cook this, but before you do, you have to take a fork and you have to poke holes in your bannock so that your dough cooks evenly all the way through, or else you will get bubbles and some parts could be raw while the other parts are cooked. And that is it. Then I would put this in the oven and it would cook for 30 minutes at 350. You could check it after 15 minutes and see if you need to flip it. Sometimes you need to flip your bannock, sometimes you don't. If your oven cooks on both sides, then you do not need to flip it. But it does need to cook for about 30 minutes. And so I'll put it over here and I'm going to show you a finished product that I did earlier so you guys could see how the bannock looks when it's cooked. And so this bannock here you could tell is bigger, and that was made with 5 cups of flour. So you've seen the difference in the 2 sizes. So this would be for a bigger supper and the other one would be for just a personal meal. But thank you very much.